Academica Media. From Academica Media Studios in Miami, Florida, it's Big Ideas in Education, a weekly recap of inspiration and innovation in your schools.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Ryan Kairalla from Academica Media. The question of what jobs will look like in the future is a difficult challenge for us as educators, and it's of critical importance to our students. What responsibilities do schools have to prepare students for the workplace of the next generation? And are we as educators doing enough to bridge the gap between schooling and skills so that education is aligned to the job market? Here to help us tackle those questions this week is Audrey Hametner, founder of the Bedrock Program, a social enterprise focused on growing, developing, engaging, and supporting tomorrow's future leaders. You can find out more about her work by visiting hametner.co. Audrey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.
Excited for this. I find this topic endlessly fascinating. I'm glad we got an expert here. Let's get right into it. How would you evaluate schools overall in how well they're preparing students for the future workforce?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily give us an A+ at this stage of the game. I think fundamentally what I find when working with young people is schools are designed to sort of look at the skills that have historically gotten people to where they are today, which means that they're always backwards focused. And in our changing economy, where jobs are changing and economies are changing every sort of 24 months, and new skills are needed, and the jobs of the future are unknown, it means that we are preparing students with the right foundation, but not the right focus. So they need the foundational skills they learn in school, but they don't know how to apply it to a changing job market. And so that they're not always looking at the new jobs coming down the road, they're looking at the jobs that we've held in the past. And that means that they're not quite aligned with what the market needs in order to find that success.
Well, that's a pretty difficult challenge, I would say, for us as educators, because if you ask any of us grown-ups what the jobs of the future look like, you're going to get a bunch of different answers. And I think the rise of AI has only further compounded that problem. So how do we as educators prepare students for the jobs of the future when we're still trying to figure out what the jobs of the future are?
I think the first thing we have to realize is that the jobs that we're doing now, the jobs that make sense for our skills and for where we've been working towards, and we've been working at building that future. The youth are the ones who are going to help to create the future that they should be prepared for. So when we look at education, instead of the old model, which is more like a factory model of like, come in, behave yourself, behave in a certain way, take these tests, show that you have this knowledge of the past in order to apply to the future, we should be rethinking it and saying, okay, we're going to teach you the foundations, because by all means, I think that this is critical. If you don't know the mistakes of the past, you'll remake them and we won't get ahead. But they should be thinking about different ways to apply it to a workforce that they're going to be coming to. So we should be including them in, private public partnerships where they are engaged with work and looking at problems that are current, because they're the ones who are going to also be a part of making the solutions for the future. So it's almost like paying more attention to predictive models, paying more attention to trends that are coming, not the traditional career, what industries have changed over time. If we do that and we link higher ed, secondary with business, then we start to be a bit more innovative. We start to, ask businesses to work with education, not to sell your products and become a Microsoft or an Apple school, but to say, hey, here are some problems that we're dealing with, and We know that you guys have some really interesting ways to approach this. And while businesses dealing with problems almost have like a youth council of sorts, also looking at these problems, becomes a feedback loop for education, but it also then becomes almost like an innovation center for companies. Do you
So
see the differences?
I do. It sounds like a critical component to bridging this skills gap is you have to bring these employers into the conversation. You have to bring their problems to the education system so that the education system can start to prepare students for how to tackle those problems when they enter into the workforce. Have you seen any examples on the ground of schools that are doing this kind of partnership model really well?
I would say I've seen bits and pieces of
Hmm.
parts of it that seem to be working well, where schools have partnerships with certain companies and say, hey, let's come in and do surveys, let's come in and get your ideas. I've seen situations here in Dubai where there have been schools that have, maybe not the whole company, but individual departments where they've allowed them to, really, but then it's a lot of companies are not quite ready for that type of engagement. So it'll be companies that are focused on the youth, right? So they think that they're doing planning for their products in the future, and so they're engaging with the youth as to what those products could look like, or they're engaging in young people in internships that have more than like a couple of weeks length in time but longer. The interesting part is when you talk to companies and they look backwards, so they're hiring practices for, say, college and university students, and then they start to take this into account. So looking at K-12, it's a little bit more difficult, but looking at sort of higher ed students and then
Yeah.
saying, okay, we'd like to engage with these students and take what they say a little more seriously. But sometimes it's a little bit too late, right? The young people who need to be engaged and inspired by what the future could hold are the ones who are looking to take the formal education of K-12 into university or college and do projects and start to investigate some exciting discoveries or things that they can do with a higher ed education.
Well, and I want to get back to that point you were mentioning about students being inspired. I think that's another one of these reasons why we have to address this skills gap, is because I think more than ever, I'm hearing from a lot of students that they're not seeing a relationship between what they're learning in school and what they're going to be doing out in the future. And so the real question they're asking is, why are we here?
Yes.
What is this for? What is the purpose? And if you can't inspire them and give them a reason to learn, that's going to make making them learn a lot more difficult. And so, I mean, would you sort of agree with that assessment that part of what we're trying to do is ascribe to these students a purpose for why they're sitting in this school by showing them a direct line between what they're doing in school versus what they're going to be doing out in the workforce?
Without question. I mean, the biggest issue, especially in K-12, is relevance. Why am I learning trig? Where does this come in handy? Why am I learning about the periodic table? Like, I don't understand. My parents don't need it and they're making money. Like, the connection just isn't there. And, when I work with schools, I'm always saying to educators, you love what you do and you understand how it relates to the world, right? You can probably come up with a million examples right off the bat. Anytime a student asks, well, where is this going to be useful in the work world? So why not embed some of those examples? Why not ask the students about where they think and get them to start thinking, oh, well, if it could be used for building bridges, then, could I possibly use this and start to embed that in the curriculum and the teaching, right? In your lesson planning, so that they ask interesting questions of the world they live in. And when they're studying that one element that they absolutely love, they might actually come over to you in a break and say, hey, miss, that was really interesting. And I was just thinking, because you said we could do this and this and this with it, do you think we could also do this, this, and this? And start to get them, that self-efficacy to take it further. It's not only just the educators and the businesses, but you got to start by nudging them towards something. And so many young people feel lost, that this is a really lovely way to bring engagement in the classroom and start to open that question about what's next.
And by the way, that moment you just identified there, where the student approaches you as a teacher and makes that connection on their own, and because of what you did as an educator, the student is able to draw their own line of relevance between what they're doing and how it could be applied. That's why we do this. I mean, that's like the great moments that we can have as educators. It's so special. I want to talk to you about AI now, because as AI has emerged and is really, especially generative AI, and it's taken such a hold in the workforce, I think that creates a unique challenge for folks in your profession who are trying to adapt education to better fit the world of work. How does AI factor into all this? How do we give students careers in which they have the AI skills necessary to do those jobs, and also help them get careers that I guess are quote unquote AI proof, where they have less of a chance of becoming replaced by AI, while they're in the workplace?
So there's a lot of fear about AI in the workplace. And to be honest with you, AI is it's like an incredibly exciting tool that's been introduced that will upend the work world, right? There was a time when we didn't have calculators and everyone had to know mental math. There was a time when we didn't have electricity, and there was a whole industry around people who would go around and light gas lanterns. And when those people were out of a job, then there was an industry of people who were, taking care of electrical wires across landscapes in order for electricity to be shared and to be used. So AI is just another tool that's going to upend certain roles, provide new roles, right? So I think that's the first thing, because a lot of the fear in AI that the young people are experiencing are partly because of the Gen Xers and the boomers that are more nervous about what this means. They're excited about what this means. So the skills that we should be teaching them, or we should be supporting them with, are the inquisitive tools about what industry that you're interested in. Do you think AI or what's coming down the road, which is quantum, what do you think we could be looking to do with the technology now to make it better? And get them to be involved and to come up with some of those ideas, because every time there's a new idea that's created, there's a whole new industry that comes alive trying to figure out how to make that work, right? Whether it's new thinkers, new apps or products or concepts that are now being brought together that need to be tested, that need to be validated. There's so much scope within change for opportunities, but everyone's so busy fearing the old, right? And this goes back to that mindset of focusing on the past instead of focusing on the opportunities in the future. That what I'm seeing is you have some young people that are so excited about the future, and they're making new things happen, and they're coming up with ideas, and they're listening to the problems that they around them and trying to solve. And then you have another group of students that are just like, what do I do? All the jobs I've been preparing for are going away. My mom says there's no jobs, and it's creating angst, and it's creating nervousness, and it's detrimental, but it's more detrimental to them because they're not putting their mind in that mindset of opportunity.
Yeah.
And then they're going to get left behind.
Oh, I love that optimistic perspective, and it's certainly one that I like to share with people young and old, as somebody who also shares your point of view on this. So let's talk about what schools could be doing to help prepare students for this. Because I've heard two very different schools of thought on how schools should approach the rise of AI. I've heard one group that says, okay, we need to get very hard into the tech side of education. STEM, STEM, STEM. Kids need, AI as a technology. We need to get kids acquainted in technology, get heavy on the tech. And I've heard an opposite school of thought, which is, drifting away from that idea, which is if AI is showing us anything, it's that a lot of the traditional tech careers that we thought would be just part of every student's life, like learning to code, that might be something AI can do. And instead, what we should be emphasizing in the schools is going back to basics. We should be going hard on the liberal arts, teaching writing and communication skills, because those are the kind of skills that are going to be valuable. Those are the kind of skills that allow you to be an effective prompter of AI and somebody who can read and understand AI's output and actually apply it to situations. Where do you stand on this?
I love both. I love,
okay.
and I think there's space for both, right? So, first of all, our schools are filled with neurodivergent children, right? It cannot be all STEM, no STEM, right? Because they can't be raised with this concept that it's all or nothing. It's not all or nothing. There are people making millions selling pencils, right? The simple industries still exist. So it's not a matter of if you are not a master in AI, you're going to get left behind. There are still craftsmen in the world, and there are people who pay a lot of money for human-made things because we still believe in it, right? So I think the first and foremost is that education needs to find that comfortable balance of being able to say, okay, a student should know how to make decisions, how to analyze things. They should be able to have that dexterity, use their hands. I mean, the fact that most people can't even boil an egg, and are having to learn on YouTube things that I took home ec classes. This dates me, right? I mean, home ec classes. How I can't find a school now who has home economics, right? Or woodworking classes. However, at the same time, our world is changing, and they should understand what is Gen AI. It's not a magic box, right? It's statistics. It is statistics. It's statistical application of large language models. And when you understand that, then they don't get afraid of it. And it will also help them learn how to analyze the information that comes out of it, because they'll know and they'll understand, oh, this isn't necessarily, the holy grail of an answer. This is one way to interpret it. Let me check it and see whether or not, and then they'll learn those skills or decision-making skills. And that's what we should be teaching in school. What is it? How do we use it? How do we break it apart? How do we understand it? And so the students who want to learn code, they should learn code. Someone's got to be able to look at an AI system that goes rogue and go in and fix it. We don't want to say, forget code. And then everyone's like, well, I don't know what to do. What do you do? I don't know. The AI always made the code. Oh dear, what do we do? Once all of our ecosystems are all combined, this doesn't make any sense. Right? Gen AI can now recreate code, but there should always be a human in the loop. And so whether or not you say, instead of having a whole school of coders, now we're going to have a small subset of individuals who can understand, read, and dissect code, fantastic. Yes, we should. But at the same time, let's also have intelligent people who at least understand the overall concepts and can work with what these applications could do, and can look for the innovative ideas on how to apply them and how to break it and how to fix it. And just like when a car was created and people started to get under the hood and tinker around and they broke things, but they knew how to fix their cars. Right? Nowadays, you can't do anything because no one knows what to do because it's all computers. So again, it's the concept that it's not just about all or one. It should be we should be creating a generations of young people that feel self-efficacy in the world that they live in. And that's what's missing, you know?
Certainly would love to see more of that infused in the education environment. I'm with you on that. Before we get to our final question, Audrey, I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about the Bedrock program and the work that you do there.
Sure. So the Bedrock program was actually born out of my corporate career, where the last role I had prior to working in education was in M&A and integrating companies. And when I was working with individuals, I realized that a lot of adults are still not aligned with what they do, even though they're successful. And so once I got into education, I started to really understand that it has more to do with how we frame careers in the minds of young people. And then they go off into the work world and it becomes, well, I wanted this job, and so I followed this job. But by the time they realize that that job doesn't really fit their values, it's too late because they have a mortgage and kids and they can't just walk away. So we wanted to really create an organization that was going to disrupt the future of work by creating a generation of people that actually followed values. They followed the impact of what they wanted to do and then aligned the jobs to the impact. That's where it came from. So with educators, we work with educators to how do you create engagement in the classroom? How do you make sure that young people start to understand the implications of what they're learning so that they can think about what they would like to see out of that in the future? And then we work with businesses to say, okay, you're hiring Gen Z and you're really struggling to keep them. Why is that? Who are you hiring? And what kind of structures have you created that is not working? So that we can find that harmony. And it's not fluffy roses. Some people just take a job because they need money. But there are people who take a job because they really want to do something, either with an organization or for a different value proposition. And when people understand that and it aligns, they will stay. If they can see a career pathway in a company, they will stay. When senior leaders or their managers understand how to relate to them, you can create the type of environment that gives them what they need, and yet the company still flourishes by having the right people. So that's what the Bedrock program is all about. We work not just with organizations, school, and businesses in the UAE, but we work with individual organizations around the globe that sort of are having that struggle, either with retaining Gen Z or getting the right output in terms of their students either becoming employable or going off to higher education to better themselves and be prepared for the work world.
Our guest has been Audrey Hametner. You can find out more about her work by visiting hametner.co. Audrey, before we let you go, we got one last question for you.
Sure.
If with the snap of your fingers, you could make any change to the education system, what change would it be?
It's a good question. I think if I could make one change, and it's a small change that I think any school or university could do that would make the biggest impact to any student, is to find the space on a regular basis to implement the need for students to do more self-reflection on their values and what's important to them. Because we don't do that. And if they do that and come up with wild things, but if they do that, over time that refines and it makes it easier to choose what they want to do in higher ed. And it would make them make it easier for them to start to reflect on the world around them and find those career opportunities that align. So it's the reflection.
Definitely sounds like that's a key component of addressing that relevance issue that we talked about earlier. Audrey, this has been a treat. Thank you so much for joining us on the program this week.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for having me.
And thank you all for checking out Big Ideas in Education.
expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.